Welcome to another MUP Short. This is Mark Zielinski, and today I have my good friend Clem.
Hi, everybody.
And we're missing Chris, so that's why I had to do that. So, and then we have our good friend Matt Gilbert from Mantic Games. How's it going, Matt?
Very well, thank you. How are you guys?
Good. And we have Matt here to talk about something super special. But before we get started, I just thought that we would go ahead and introduce Matt to the MUP audience. So, Matt, can you give us a little insight in case somebody doesn't know who Matt Gilbert is? A little background, a little history?
Yeah, so I've been with Mantic now for, beginning of 2016. So what does that do, the maths? Is it 8 years? 9 years? I don't know. a while. So I've overseen a lot. So I head up the studio at Mantic. I'm also co-director with Ronnie. So between the two of us, we steer the ship. But yeah, anything product-wise, IP-wise, anything like that goes over my desk. So if I haven't directly created it myself, I'll have had a hand in it in terms of either art direction or editing or play testing or anything really. And then on top of that, I do all the HR and IT and contracts and all sorts of bits and pieces. So a lot really.
So you're kind of the brains behind the awesome rules that we have when we play Mantic Games. Is that right?
Well, if you ask Ronnie, then I'm the person that cleans up his mess after he has all the ideas.
So that's teamwork.
Yeah. So we're going to do this, and then I have to figure out how.
Sounds cool. And how did you get into gaming to begin with? Like, I suppose you don't wake up one morning and become like head of a gaming company studio. There must be something going on before that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's been my hobby for 35 or more years. So kind of started out, picked up some fighting fantasy game books way back. And then, picked up a White Dwarf magazine, started playing Warhammer, Hero Quest, all of those sorts of things, progressed through all of workshop stuff, and then moved on when I was at university into things like Battletech, card games, Silent Death, all sorts, and then moved back to 40k and Fantasy Battle, and then found Kings of War, and then it kind of all went from there. We kind of made the switch to mostly Mantic stuff, and then I was got quite heavily involved with the Pathfinder program, which is Mantic's kind of volunteers for stores and shows and stuff. And then got writing for them, was the chairman of the Kings of War RC for a long time. And with my job, I had some staff up in Nottingham, so I'd come up here once a month, and I'd go out with Ronnie or stuff, and we got talking about jobs and things like that. And then one day at Clash of Kings, I was at the bar, and he came up to me and said, "That job we were talking about, do you want it?" And I said, "Yes, go on then." And so I managed to leave IT, which is what I was doing, and find my way into the games industry.
Interesting background. I don't think I've heard that story before. Thanks for sharing it. So maybe to get started with the Warpath epic, can you describe a little bit what's the Mantic process or recipe when you start working on a game? Like, how do you get started with this? Like, where does this all come from?
Well, a lot of it, I guess, a lot of it's experience. It's have any of us played these kind of games before? Is there certainly if it's a licensed game, it's which of us knows the license, or if we don't, then everyone has to go off and read it and become an expert. Obviously, if it's within our own IP, then it's a lot easier. We know that because we develop it ourselves. But you always start a game with you look back and what have we played in the past that's similar? What do we enjoy? What do we want a game to be? What's the audience? What do we want it to feel like? Commercially, how do we want it to look? And then when you've kind of done those things and you start the rules writing, it's okay. Well, what makes this? What are the kind of the 2 or 3 key things that kind of make this a game? What are the things that we want to layer on top? Once you've done those and you put the kind of the Mantic DNA through the game, then you can start testing and pare it back, because whatever you do, you're always going to go can it go too far in one direction, or you're going to think something's clever and actually it's a barrier to fun or just clunky. So you then just start that process of refining and go from there.
Oh, that's interesting. And so in the case of Epic Warpath, or Warpath Epic, I don't know in which order you say it, when did that kind of start? Because there used to be a Warpath game. I did not play it myself, but that was quite some time ago already. And now it's coming back, but it's a different rule set, different scale. So how did you guys target, okay, we want to do a 10 mil game, and this is how we want to structure the rules, sort of? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so Warpath, the first and second editions of Warpath, really, certainly the first one was almost Kings of War in space. That was where it started. The second one was a little bit different. I think that did move on to things like alternating activations and stuff. And then there was a Kickstarter for Warpath, and this is still all at 28 mil scale. I think that the general feeling that the backers expressed during that Kickstarter was fantastic plastic, all the stuff, love the races, love the background, but this feels like it's trying to be, you're cramming too much. You want an epic kind of massive game with all your stuff playing in an evening, and that didn't quite resonate with people, which is where Firefight, which is what kind of spawned Firefight. So that first Warpath Kickstarter was only intended to be the Warpath rule set, but actually it ended up being Warpath rule set and the Firefight rule set. And Firefight was where people kind of naturally migrated to with their 28 mil stuff. And that kind of massive game you can't really play in an evening, otherwise everything's on the table and there's no room to move, and it's just overcrowded. It's the kind of game you want to play with your mates once every 2 or 3 months. You have a whole weekend to play it. You've got 2 or 3 tables put together, and and everyone brings all their stuff and great fun. So there was always a feeling that kind of big game should always have been pitched at a smaller model scale. And obviously, following the success of the Firefight back in, when was that, 22? I can't remember. We do so many things. It was like
something like that. Yes, about 2 years ago now.
Yeah, I think so. Dead Zone, obviously a hugely successful skirmish game. So you got that level. Firefight, the edition, we've gone back and revised the rules and everything else. Very, very successful. And it's like, well, now's the time to go back to Warpath, and do that kind of those epic battles at that smaller scale. That was the decision making process. We've got the skirmish scale, we've got the kind of platoon type company scale stuff for Firefight. So let's go bigger, but to go bigger you need to go smaller.
Yeah, that makes sense. But so the first thing I thought when I heard about Warpath Epic is how is that going to work, in the sense that, for me at least, when you play a smaller scale game like sci-fi, a smaller scale, you really need like an actually epic battle, like with huge monsters, huge robots and so on. And right now I kind of have in my head the Warpath universe is, well, to make a comparison, it's not like Eternal War everywhere with an existential fight. And so maybe it doesn't sound at first approach as prone to huge battles like this. But I guess there is some margin there. Do you have any vision for this? Like, how do you? Because the squad battles I play and I enjoy very much with Firefight, but I'm trying to imagine what is the step up from those squad-based fights to huge battles.
Well, I think you can imagine the galaxy is huge, so there's always going to be fights. There's right now in the timeline there's a massive fight going on between the Asterians and the Forge Fathers in the Kapanu sector or area of space. So there are huge battles going across planets there. When a corporation goes and takes over a planet, it's not small skirmishes. There'll be full on warfare. When the plague infests a planet, if containment protocols aren't fast enough, it can be all out warfare, and that could be not because the forces might not have got there yet, but if you imagine that the forces that are there that haven't been infected yet are going to be fighting for their lives, and it's going to be on a massive scale. I think so. The main driver of conflict is probably the expansion of the corporations, and they don't care. They'll go and assault an entire planet if they want to.
Right, it's a pretty big universe anyway. So, and I guess also whatever battle we can represent on a 6x4, even a tail mill, is kind of small in the scale of a planet, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
That makes sense.
But then that's where you give your scope for your narrative battles. You can say, you can campaign things together, and it can be part of a bigger narrative that way, can't it?
That sounds good. But so we haven't seen everything from the Kickstarter yet, obviously. We're recording this before the start of the Kickstarter, but we'll publish right at the start of the Kickstarter. Do you have any juicy bits for us, like of what is in the stretch goals, or like some things we could be looking forward to? For example, in terms of STLs, of bigger monsters, bigger tanks, bigger vehicles of some sorts, or anything special like this, or is it still a surprise?
Yeah, so every army has core plastic, and then there's a reinforcements pack, which is kind of specialist troops, a mix of infantry and vehicles and command and stuff like that, and flyers and things. And that's available as either, you can buy that STL as either resin. You can buy that reinforcement pack as either resin or STL. You've got a choice, either or. Every army also has a super heavy. So there's your big robots or ships or whatever that may be, or monsters. So that's you build your army from plastic core, reinforcements, and super heavy, and each of them follows that same pattern. There'll be some daily reveals where some things will be kind of question marked out, so we'll show what those are on each day. And stretch goals will be to unlock new factions. We're starting with 4, which are Enforcers, Plague, Asterians, and Forge Fathers, and then we've got another 4 in the pipeline to be unlocked through stretch goals.
4 armies. So can we guess on which ones those are?
You can guess.
I can guess. Let's see. GCPS only so we can make Clem happy. Let's see. Rackend, and then Maison Labs, and then I had it. It's disappeared out of my mind. Clem, you got one?
I have several. It could be Nameless.
Orcs,
it could be Night Stalkers, Marauders, plenty of things. But for plastics, I would guess Marauders. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
I would imagine
it's a big universe. We've got there's lots of factions out there.
Right. But I mean, so Maison Labs, you would expect the plastics to be the same as Plague and GCPS. So I don't think that's one of the 4 that Matt has in mind to unlock plastics. I would say Nameless or Night Stalkers. Night Stalkers would be pretty cool. Nameless as well. Yeah.
Well, can you just hear the uproar if we get Nameless and stuff like that in Epic? It's like, I want it in my firefight. So that would be a nice way to put the 2 games together, I guess. But let Epic get a little bit first. But I know the Veerman, everyone is looking forward to them. So hopefully we can unlock them. And hopefully they're early up in the rotation.
Well, also doing things at this scale allows us to do things that we haven't done at or maybe even couldn't do at the 28mm scale. Because investment in a whole new type of vehicle is, in plastic it's a massive investment at 28mm, but it's a small part of a sprue at this scale, at this epic scale. So it allows us to flesh things out. Obviously, we've got all the things that people would expect that you've already got in your Dead Zone and Firefight, or most of them, but then we can sprinkle in some new stuff too.
So how did you pick the first 4 armies that you were going to release for Epic?
I went with Enforcers and Plague because they're because kind of harking back to Dead Zone, the original. They were the kind of the two sparring factions in Dead Zone. So that seemed like a nice callback. And then I wanted to go Alien, really, not far out Alien like Night Stalkers or something like that to start with, but certainly non-human, and those two felt like another good pairing of kind of ancient enemies, if you like. So it felt like they felt like four nice Mantic armies to begin with.
And is there some sort of special narrative or something that with these four factions, or is there any advancing plot in the Warpath universe with the arrival of Epic Warpath? Like, is there also a starter set to be expected for it? Like, what's the vision around it?
I mean, yeah. So I wrote a bit of background so that the Kickstarter campaign's got some lore to it and some context. Why these four are fighting. So that was there, and that story will get. I guess the team will sprinkle that through the campaign and through content updates and things like that. But yeah, certainly with when this goes to retail, well, there'll be things like starter sets for sure.
That's pretty good. And so, yeah, I think you mentioned you chose 10 mil scale because it gives more space when you want to do a battle, but also it's 10 and not 8 or 12 or something else because that was the best looking scale, or is there a different technical reason with it? Or
we didn't pick a scale. We didn't say, right, this is going to be 8 or this is going to be 15 or whatever. We did some T-poses of some Enforcers, and we printed them off at various sizes. And we just looked at them and went, yeah, that's too big. No, that's too small. No, that one's about right. That's a nice level of detail and it's a nice size. And that happens for an Enforcer to be 12 mil to the top of the head. So things like a normal human are probably going to be around 10 or 11 mil to the top of the head. Obviously Forge Fathers are smaller. The vehicles I've shrunk down slightly smaller again. That's for a technical reason. It doesn't look most of them don't look too small on side by side with the infantry and stuff, because infantry are quite spread out on their bases. But it means I can fit them all on the frame, and then when we once we're working with the tooling factory and they come back and say, okay, you've got more room on the frame than we thought, then I can start scaling those vehicles back up again. It's better to have them slightly smaller than I want, and then be able to increase them back up, like 5%, 10% or whatever, than start too small and then realize I can't fit them on the frame.
Oh, that makes sense. And also, I guess scale is kind of a relative thing anyway, especially because you guys will release some terrain from day one, basically, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so we're working with a company that already produces terrain, and that terrain is designed to work from 6 to 15 mil. So where we are, it's perfect because it's right in the middle of that range.
And so maybe we can jump into more questions about the rule set itself. So as you might have heard on the pod, we love Firefight, and we're also very happy with the latest command protocols. And so when I was reading the articles about the new rule set, it sounds very close, pretty inspired. Is that like intentional to have Epic not so far from Firefight, so that whenever you want to play a big game of Firefight, well, you use the Epic miniatures and a slightly different rule sets? Or can you tell us a bit more, how do you see the differences or the links between Firefight and Epic?
I guess, like I mentioned before, when you're writing the game, it's nice to have, certainly especially with games in the same universe, is to have a similar DNA running through them, so that obviously games in their own right, but if someone is moving from one to the other, whether that is from Dead Zone to Warpath, or Warpath to Firefight, or whatever it may be, there are familiar things. There are some familiar keywords. They might have to work in a slightly different way, but they're roughly going to be what you expect them to be. And there'll be some familiar mechanics. And there's throughout Dead Zone to Firefight and Warpath, they all use D8s, and they all use some kind of command dice mechanic as well for getting off your specialist stuff and the things that give the your troops a little boost, or the army flavor and things like that. So those sort of things then feel familiar to people moving from one system to the next, and it's just an easier transition.
No, that part makes sense, but then there's no exploding aids in Firefight or in Epic. The command dice are different, I guess, between Dead Zone and Firefight, now Epic. But yeah, otherwise it does feel like a Mantic game. Right?
Yeah, and I think if you think about, sometimes you have to adapt mechanics or change them based on the scale of the game. Some things aren't appropriate. So, if I'm in Firefight or I'm in Warpath and I'm rolling, let's say, 15 dice, and I've got exploding ones, I'm suddenly starts to get a bit more messy. Whereas in Dead Zone, if I'm only rolling 5 dice and I've got exploding ones, it's not, it's not as messy, and it's not so much of a time sink working all of them out and things like that. So it's just and sometimes it doesn't necessarily warrant it. I think in Dead Zone and in Dreadball, the exploding mechanic works well because of the way the dice tests work. But when you're rolling to wound, rolling to hit, you got multiple rolls. You don't want exploding 8s all the way through that.
No, that makes a big difference. I mean, I loved it in Vanguard, for example. But I do see what you mean, that it could have a larger impact here.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if we put exploding 6s into Kings of War and then you charge someone in the rear with 100.
I mean, that could be
God.
That could be a special keyword, right?
Well, to add exploding, yeah. I mean, potentially.
I mean, I think now there is a rule, but it's on 6s you get a second hit or something. Like 6s count as blast 2, so it's not literally an exploding 8, because exploding 8s, they can just keep happening and happening and happening. So that's slightly different. Speaking of so Vanguard and fantasy stuff, is there any? I have to ask this question because you might know that I love Kings of War in smaller size. Are there any possibility down the road to also do like a fantasy game in smaller scale, or is there something that you've thought about one way or another, or not yet? Not really.
I have, and I've dabbled with some testing, some sculpting at that scale, and working out how it would be done. But it's not on the release schedule, and it's not on any immediate plans. But it's definitely something we've looked at. Once we've done the sci-fi version, it could well be something that we look at in the future to tackle it in that kind of scale gaming on the fantasy world. Bring it to Panathor. But it's not something I've got on my immediate radar.
That's something I've talked to Matt about before. I've got a couple ideas still to pitch to you, Matt, on that. So,
I'm Scott, aka Palette of War. Welcome to Mantic Universe Podcast, and check out my YouTube and Instagram.
I mean, I think it's a good format to play it. I love Kings of War in 28, but in 10 mil it brings something slightly different. And again, I think it's an option to bring different rules. Maybe if you still play it on a 6x4, but with smaller sized miniatures. So anyway, we can see that later. Speaking of table size, is there a mode in Epic where you can play it on a smaller table size, like 3x3, like Ambush? Or not really?
I haven't played it on anything that small. We've tested on 4x4 and 6x4 as the standard table sizes. I haven't tried it on anything smaller. I mean, I guess there's no reason why you couldn't. You just reduce the size of the game, and you'd reduce the deployment zones and things like that. So I mean, as we go through the next rounds of playtesting, we could ask some people to try it at smaller scale. I don't know if, again, I don't know. They might come back and say it was great, but we think you need to change the way that forces are selected, for example, to put some limitations in or whatever, which is what Ambush does. So it might be something similar, but it's not something I've looked at to start with.
Boy, yeah, Low Point Games, you're right up my alley there. So I will definitely be trying that out for you, Matt. So don't worry.
Okay.
Hey, I have to ask. I saw an article that kind of addressed this, but why'd you go with circle bases as opposed to like rectangles or some kind of weird shape?
Because I think square bases feel more fantasy to me because they come from that kind of rank and flank world. Round bases just look and feel more sci-fi, and actually when you visualize it, it's almost like you can almost visualize it like you're playing a game of firefight, and yes, it's a base of 4 guys, but really it could be one. You could almost replace it to do that, and therefore it feels round bases. Elements of units where they can move, they can see in all directions and can move in all directions, then feels a bit odd to have them all on square bases. Round almost shows you it's 360 for everything they can do.
Oh, very, very cool. Do you have the Forge Fathers sculpted already? Or I haven't seen any real photos of them except for the early 3D prints that were shown in one of the earlier photos or videos or something like that. So.
The plan was to have all the core plastic for the first 4 armies sculpted in time for the Kickstarter, and then we might have some of the reinforcement stuff, the things that are resin stuff coming through as well. But the goal was to have the first 4 plastic core bits done. So that'll be sculpts for Enforcers, Plague, Forge Fathers, and Asterians.
Oh, fantastic. I'm really looking to see what vehicles, get sculpted for the Forge Fathers. I'm kind of excited about that one. So be very cool. We've seen a lot of Enforcers and a lot of Plague lately and a little bit of the Asterians. So
yeah, I think I think there was one picture of the Forge Fathers, the guys with those at the Thorogrim, the guys with the 2-handed hammers. I think that went up somewhere.
Oh, yeah, I think that's right. That was in the blog, so I believe. So, yeah. Again, I'm interested really in their vehicles. So I just think they've got such cool vehicles. I'd love to see how they work in there. And speaking of which, back to the bases thing, it looks like the vehicles do not have bases. So
no. So originally we were looking at bases, and we were looking at oval ones or maybe square or slightly rounded corners, and then we decided that actually it's better to write the rules so that you don't need bases, and then people can base them if they want, than to mandate bases, because half of everyone doesn't like having bases on their vehicles and half do. So let's write the rules for no bases, and then it doesn't matter if people base them.
Thank you, because I am in the no base on vehicle camp.
Yeah, I think it looks better, but I also don't dislike bases as well. So I'm ambivalent to it, but it made sense to write the rules for it doesn't no bases, and then you can base if you want.
Yeah, for the look of it, I would rather not have bases, but I mean, in terms of rules, I can understand why, and it's not like I'm strictly against bases. Just if I have the choice, like my bolt action armies, for example, I do not have bases on my vehicles, and so it's maybe a bit different, or like flyers, obviously you would have a base.
Yes, the flyers.
GCPS obviously have a
flying base. Yeah.
So you mentioned flyers. Do we have flyers coming?
Yeah, so the like the Enforcers have obviously got like the was it the Accuser and the Persecutor.
The Hornet? No, the Hornet is for the GCPS and Plague.
Hornet's in there. Plague have got Hornet. So yeah, the normal flyers are all in there. Maybe some other ones as well.
Oh, nice. Well, again, I'm hoping for synergy between the two games. So, if we get some really cool vehicles in Epic, maybe, some of them, like the big artillery pieces, aren't going to fit. But, like a cool flyer or something would be, neat to bring over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably an option, but at the same time, having the smaller scale lets you do much bigger stuff, so that probably wouldn't work in Firefight, I suppose. I was curious also about the sculpting and like creating all of the models for Epic. You mentioned, I think, in some of the blog posts, everything has been resculpted for the different scale, right? Like it's not just a downsize of older existing plastic sprues that you already have.
Correct.
So that's a huge amount of work. Is that still like the same team doing the sculpting, or are you working with freelancers or hiring more people? Because it looks like Mantic is outputting more and more models, and so I suppose it requires more and more workforce for it.
Well, we don't have any. I have my studio. I have no in-house artists, no in-house concepts, no in-house sculpting. My studio team is me, my sculpt manager, photographer, and graphic designer. There's just the four of us. So everything we do, all sculpting, everything is outsourced. Now I do have Luigi, who's our main sculptor, who's he's not directly employed by Mantic, but he's effectively employed. He's on a monthly retainer. So he does the bulk of our sculpting for us. But when he's full up, then we'll go out. We've got some other people that do stuff for us, but it's all freelance work. So the two that are doing the bulk of the Warpath stuff are, in fact, one of them's the same guy that does the terrain for us. He did Terrain Code 3 and everything. So he'll focus on a lot of the vehicles. The other guy's focusing on the infantry. So the infantry, or the bulk, most of the infantry you've seen is him. This guy called John. So he's done most of that. He's very good with understanding casting and how to pose things, and especially for these, because all those infantry will need to be one-piece casts. So he's very good at that. Luigi we use for all of our all 28mm stuff and all the board game stuff and everything else, all Kings of War. So he did some of the Asterians and things like that, but I think his stuff will need more work to get it into plastic. But again, that's a skill that him and Dave, who's my sculpt manager, are learning as well. Working with our plastic partners is getting better and better at working out where the mold's going to run and what the casting angles are going to be, and what the drafting lines and undercuts and all of that sort of stuff. But I think it's a different skill set at different scales of model. So while Luigi's getting really really great at it at the 28mm scale, I think it's different at you have to sculpt in a slightly different way, and slightly chunkier, thicker way, and think about things slightly differently when you're at the smaller scales.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to confess, I play Kings of War sometimes in 10mm, and so I use Warmaster miniatures. And there are a bunch of creators for this nowadays, like that publish STL files, and they're not all equal, right? Like everyone has their own style, of course, but some of them are just better designed. And I think it really is a different thing when you do smaller size. So it's good to hear that you guys already work with people who know what they're doing precisely at this different scale. And I'm excited to get my hands onto those models. I guess also doing STLs or plastic, hard plastic is a different ball game. Like you have different constraints when you design. So that's probably not too easy. And
I mean, with STLs, you almost have no constraints, because it will, as long as you put your supports in properly, it will print. You don't have to worry about undercuts. You don't have to worry about anything really. Obviously, things being too thin and brittle still, but
right, there's a lot less constraints, but some things don't look too good, right? Like you could see the layers if you have like inclined or like wrong angles. Somehow it shows a lot more that it's printed. And also supports are not so great. Like if you have things that are a bit too thin, you might break more easily. So as you mentioned, also you have to have stuff a bit more chunky in smaller scale. But it's lot less constraining in the plastic that I can imagine.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, is this going to be all hard plastic, or is there going to be resin involved? And
so there's a core plastic for every army. So each army is consisting of a pack of core plastic. Then the reinforcement pack, which is, as I said before, is either resin or STL. You can choose which way to buy it. And then the super heavy will be resin or STL.
So when you say core plastic, is that one sprue,
hard
two
plastic.
sprues? Yeah, hard plastic. Is that one sprue, 2, 3, 5 sprues?
One sprue.
So it's one sprue per faction with some vehicles and some infantry.
Yes, and you'll get multiples of those, and that will build you enough for a substantially sized army. We've played in our playtest days. We usually play the first game with effectively just the contents of plastic, and you can fill a table with that.
That's great. I mean, that's kind of what you want to do, right? It sounds like it's a good mix. Again, best use of existing technologies. Like you have the hard plastic for stuff you want a lot of, and then some STLs or resin for like the more customized pieces, or like a bit more rare units where you want crazier designs than what the hard plastic can let you do. So that's quite exciting. So you said March 24, right? We'll get our hands on this in a month.
Yeah, it's a typical Kickstarter and typical Kickstarter timelines. I'd say typical Kickstarter. This is, to me, and I think to everyone who's looking at it, this feels like a much more of an old school Kickstarter. It's got that kind of vibe. It's kind of, the value that's in it, the fact that, as money coming in and hitting those stretch goals will unlock our ability to start sculpting new armies. We're not going into this having sculpted 8 armies. We've gone into it having sculpted the core plastic for 4. So those 4 aren't sculpted yet. Some bits aren't concepted yet. So as we unlock new armies, it's going to be. We think it's going to contain all of these things. And here's what they look like at 28 mil, but it'll be smaller versions of these. And here's all some new stuff we've thought about. We don't know what those look like yet, but we will make them. So we need to give ourselves a year to make all that stuff and deliver it.
That's okay. You can take some time to make it. But so it's really up to us to spread the good word and get as many of this stuff coming out.
And that year as well gives us time to we've done these playtest days, and I'll roll that out to a wider group again to test things and refine the scenarios and how they're constructed, and points values and profiles and all of that stuff, and especially of the new things. I've written army lists for the next 4, and what units I'm expecting to be in them, and what a frame layout might look like and stuff like that. But that's as far as they've all got. None of them have been play tested yet. Obviously, they've been designed knowing what the first 4 are capable of, and having a thorough understanding of the game and what's powerful, what's weak, what need those kind of things. But the next round of play testing will be whatever we unlock. We'll start to get tested and refined and sculpted.
That's pretty exciting. Oh, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
So, Matt, you have a co-designer or a co-developer. Alessio's helping you out with this game. What kind of role is he playing in the development?
So I'd kind of written. So I'd written the core rules. I'd done some, certainly the first 2 army lists, Plague and Enforcers. I'd mocked up the Forge Fathers and the Asterians, and I'd got to a point I was getting so busy with other stuff. I said to Alessio, can you come in and just help me to start with, look at these army lists, just kind of sanity check them, have a read through the rules, and then give me your initial thoughts, without playing the game, give me your initial thoughts, and start thinking about how you would do army construction and a points formula, and start looking at those kind of things for me. And it's coming in 1 day a week for some consultancy stuff, and then we started to have discussions and whiteboard stuff and all sorts, and then we played some games, and from that it's still the 1 day a week, but it's been really valuable having him in, where we bounce ideas off of each other and we say, okay, yeah, that doesn't work, that does work. this is too complicated, let's strip that back in. And he's very good at looking at things from that point of view and saying that's too complicated, take that out, simplify, simplify, simplify. I think is his motto. But then sometimes I've said, no, I want to keep that in, but you're right, I want to keep it in, but we can change it so it's more like what you want. But I think we've worked together very well, and we kind of think along the same lines. As we're discussing things, we're both kind of playing games in our heads and saying, oh, hang on, that doesn't work because X, Y, Z, or we've sat around a desk, pushing bases round and pencils and writing, scribbling stuff down and saying, oh, what if, if someone did that, we need a rule for that. And then every couple of weeks we'll go off and play a test game and, okay, that did work, that didn't work. So it's been very valuable. And like with anything, even with the two of us and our experience, one of the games I got the most notes out of was when I took it back to my gaming buddies down on the south coast and gave it to them one evening and said, this is Warpath, here are the rules, here are your army lists, play a game and I'll just watch. And I took, I had 3 or 4 pages of notes just watching them because they'd never played before. They play their own styles in a different way. And it's like, well, I knew you could do that, but I've never seen it. We've never done that before. Okay, yeah, that breaks that. Or okay, I'm going to you were right, or Alessio was right. We do need to change this, and then that fixes all of those problems. So that was really valuable watching other people play.
And speaking of collaborations like this, I'm thinking about the lore side of things, like the Warpath universe. Obviously, we've said a few times on the pod that we loved Rob Berman's short stories for Dead Zone. Yeah. Or it was for the Dead Zone new starter. And I've also read his fantasy book. Like I'm turning into a fanboy basically. But my question was more: do you also work with external people to write some lore or like build up the universe for Warpath? And can I look forward to some novels alongside the release of Warpath Epic, to support kind of the imagination building aspect of the game?
I mean, most stuff. Obviously, when Rob was working for us, he wrote stuff. I've written lore for both as well. But again, most of the lore is externally written, so commissioned by me, with some guidelines and drafts and some. It might be some. It's never particularly detailed because I don't want to curtail someone's creativity. But it might be you need to hit these key points, or I need to start here and end here. But how you get there, I don't mind. Most stuff's externally written.
So you are the architect still, like with the vision for the universe, and then you get external help to figure out the details and actually write the novels. But Can you tell us, like, are there some additional sci-fi novels planned for the future, or is it still something that you guys are thinking about?
Still thinking about. There's nothing planned for Warpath.
I highly support the creation of some. Maybe it could be a hidden stretch goal somewhere on the Kickstarter or something. I don't know if you could find an author. Mark, do you have someone in mind who could write a cool sci-fi Warpath novel, maybe?
Well, I mean, you've got your standard group, I mean, Clint would be great. So we've already got a stable. Guy Haley.
Clint, I've spoken to Clint about it, and he's a fantasy. He doesn't really do sci-fi.
He doesn't want to do it, huh? Okay. Well, I mean, those are the thoughts off the top of my head. We actually have a podcast with Brandon coming up soon, so I will ask him this question for you, Clem.
Thank you very much. No, I think it's an interesting part of the universe. What I really love about Firefight, for example, is the universe is very interesting. I find, at least, like it's not the one-dimensional. There's war and that's it. There is something that I feel a bit closer to, and I like this part. And I'm sure it could be explored in more novels to kind of feed our imagination when we build our own scenarios, our own stories. And again, I don't really need to see stories of Firefight games written in a book. What I want is some tidbits that I can reuse myself when I come up with my scenarios, my own one-day campaigns and stuff like this. But okay, now that's an interesting thing to look forward to as well.
All right, well, we're getting near the end of the pod, and why don't we go ahead and get some details on the Kickstarter itself. This pod is dropping on February 14th, and the Kickstarter is now live. And so I thought we'd get a little bit of detail here. So as we mentioned before, we've got the Asterians, the Plague, the Forge Fathers, and the Enforcers, and so which is very, very exciting. And we've already talked about that a bit. And then let's take a quick look at the pledge levels. So let's see, we're going to have a 1 army starter pledge, and that's going to be the game essentials and 1 core army box. Let's see. And so the game essentials are a softback rulebook, the dice, and the punch board with the token sheets. And a core army includes 160 plus hard plastic miniatures, depending on the faction. So you can be able to choose there. And then there's going to be a 2 army starter pledge, which is going to be the game essentials and 2 core army boxes. And then the 4 army starter pledge, game essentials and 4 core army boxes. And then my favorite, and we're going to talk about this one, Matt, the high command pledge. So game essentials, an XL terrain pack, 4 army boxes, 4 reinforcement boxes, and 4 super heavy boxes. Wow. Okay. So
a lot of stuff.
It's a lot of stuff. So we talked a little bit about the terrain earlier. Is there any more detail you have on that, or?
So it's all modular. So it's very much like the battle zone, the Dead Zone battle zones terrain. So it's all based on modular tiles like that. So it's an existing range, but we've added tooling to it so that some of those tiles replicate the Dead Zone scenery just at the smaller scale, so replicate the tiles. And actually Ben, who is his terrain range, as I said, he sculpts for us anyway, and he sculpted all the Dead Zone stuff. So it's kind of just natural to him to do that. So that XL pack contains tons and tons of modular stuff for building. You can probably do 8-10 buildings of
and it's hard plastic
stuff
again.
You want. It's all hard plastic, yeah. There's roads in there. I think there's about 2 meters of road, something like that. Landing pads, towers, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, and all the tiles are all double-sided. So they've got different designs and things on them. And as you've probably seen from the pictures that we've sent out, it all meshes and kit bashes brilliantly with the larger scale Dead Zone stuff.
That's pretty exciting.
Ben, our photographer, kit bash loads of stuff that Ben gave us with the larger Dead Zone stuff, pipes and chimneys and even bits from Terrain Crate. I think with the boiler from one of I think it was Here's an Egan set or something like that. He's got on the side of a building. You can't tell. It looks brilliant. So you can. Obviously, the small scale stuff on its own is fantastic, but yeah, there's mixing it with the bigger stuff as well, and it's all sorts of scope for brilliant things.
That's going to be pretty exciting. And can you tell us a bit more about the 4 additional factions? Like, are they like stretch goals, and the way to see them happen is just that the Kickstarter reaches a certain amount, or is there any way for the backers to vote on it or say, hey, we want to see this faction before that faction or anything like this?
I'm not sure how they're planning to roll them out. There was talk at one point about voting or seeing which order people wanted them in. I think they've decided on what the first one will be. I mean, I guess by the point people listening to this, that will know one way or the other what that first stretch goal is. But beyond that, I don't know. I mean, it might be that the guys
still open.
Decide to, I'm not sure if they have decided they haven't told me. I don't get to hear everything. Sometimes some things are nice as a surprise.
Well, that's all pretty exciting. I think now the only thing that is left for us to do is patiently wait for about a year until the miniatures reach us, and also talk about it to all of our friends and bring in as many people as we can so that the Kickstarter goes as big as possible, right?
Absolutely. Let's unlock all those other 4, and who knows? If we blow the doors off, then maybe we get a chance to do everything in plastic. Who knows? That would be amazing.
Well, that would be amazing. So, we can't wait. What the estimated delivery date is March 2025. So I'm very, very excited, though. So, if you have not seen the Kickstarter, we'll throw a link in the show notes if this is the first place you're hearing about it, so you can go check it out. And I am looking forward to more epic excitement here that we will bring you on the Mantic Universe podcast. I know that there's great information out there on Mantic blog. They put out a how to play video, which I really enjoyed, Matt. Those plague look very tough. So I'm thinking more and more about them. That was a really good video. You played Andy and it was fantastic. So very, very good. So any piece of parting wisdom you want to leave us with, Matt?
No, I guess it's just, jump on board. Once we're through the other side of the campaign, we will be opening it up to some play testing. So I'll work out the logistics of that, and that'll be quite structured. But I want it as a wider group, because hopefully we'll have 8 armies to test, and across all the scenario combinations as well. So lots to do.
Oh, very, very, very good. Well, just remember, you've got somebody here in Ohio and somebody out there in Germany that are very interested in playtesting, right, Clem?
Pretty much. And thanks again for joining us, Matt, today. And I guess we'll have you over again anytime you like, or to come and talk to us about Vanguard 2.0 anytime that comes up on the horizon. We're big fans of this here, at least I am. And it was really nice talking to you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Very nice. Well, folks, and until next time, always remember, so much universe, so little time.